when I was using substances, I had so many people turn their backs on me and so many doors closed just because I was labeled with that. But once I found like-minded people who opened those doors and picked me up instead of continued to try to put me down and dictate what I had to do before I could access this or before I could access that. When we truly meet the individual where they're at, beautiful things can happen. I'm living proof of it. Like I said, I would not be sitting here if it wasn't for a handful of people who literally picked me up when I was at my lowest. So.
I'll say that I can be a very direct person, and sometimes that's hard for people to hear constructive feedback or criticism. And I think that we need to be more humble about what we are or aren't doing as individuals and organizations. And we need to be more open to the ways that what we're doing isn't working. Because I think that that's part of the problem.
But when you're street entrenched and of street, like you may be sleeping in somebody's basement, but when you're of street, and you have been for a long time, a couple of things happen. We have so thoroughly othered ourselves. And anybody that washes every day, has more than 2 sets of earrings, an SUV with a loan, they're part of the them. Every doctor, every nurse, every real estate agent, every person in the bank, that's part of them, and then there's us. And we are less than, and we are here. And that you take on as identity, because you gotta have value somewhere. Not being like that becomes our value. The other thing that happens, your internal dialogue does 2 things. It speeds up, and it shortens in duration. I know for sure, I was one of the people you see downtown. I was constantly, at that time, reciting what would be my speech in court when I was talking to the Crown or the judge to explain how I got there. And I know I was walking along and doing that speech. And it got tighter in a loop, and then that loop is inside another loop, because you're always looking for danger, right? And another loop, and it's speedy, and it gets tighter and tighter and tighter. It isn't uncommon to sit with somebody who's there, and they're barely aware you're there. And it can take several minutes. The longest it's taken me was like 45 minutes, and then dude was able to communicate directly to the words out of my mouth and make eye contact.
Oftentimes, they'll try and push you away, even though you're a peer. That's just because they're maybe having a meltdown that day. And what do I do to make sure that they, know that I support them is that I keep coming back. Like as much as they might push me away, I know they don't mean it. As they're pushing, they're already regretting. So I just let them know that, hey, I'm still here, even if you're having the worst day ever. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was somebody that, I learned to trust. I just remember, I always appreciated that I had somebody I could go to and just kind of vent and bitch and complain because it was taking so long. That kind of, every once in a while, I would, kind of vent.
I find it doesn't matter who you're with, when you talk to them from the heart and connect to them on the heart level, then it's easy to portray what folks need. You must connect with them on the heart level.
Well, you know, it's important. It's important that they understand and I would say respect, maybe, but at least understand the cultural differences and you know, have a good understanding of the history of Indigenous people in this country, and you know, because I think if they approach you know, when they're working with somebody like myself, if they approach it with a better understanding, then it kind of makes things go a lot easier. I think most of it comes from just a lack of understanding. Like, they just don't understand, and they don't know the history. And you know, I say this to people all the time. You know, if they had just learned about residential schools and all the things that Indigenous people went through, then they would have a better understanding of why we are the way we are now. You know, it would it would certainly help anyway.
We've been able to shift the discourse on certain things, like, not discourse, but some policies around, okay, yes, we can find ways for people who are unhoused to stay with their pet and their partner in a shelter. But, you know, but there's still so many other challenges in a shelter environment, and most shelters are focused on abstinence. And if you're someone who uses substances and needs to continue using, maybe you shouldn't be giving a 30-day service restriction to someone who overdoses on your property outside. Like, that is not, that is an inhumane and unkind response to someone who has a health need, you know? And how do we shift that as a sector?
Again, the shelter systems, you have pretty strict parameters if you want to access services here. You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this. You have to engage with your worker. You have to, you know, you have to be back in the shelter by a certain time. If you're 2 minutes late, you're not getting in. If you're not engaging with your worker, you're not getting in. Well, never mind the worker trying to engage with the individual experiencing homeless. We put the onus on the individual who's experiencing the homeless to engage with the worker. It needs to be reversed. It should be the worker's responsibility to engage with that person, not vice versa.
You must connect on a heart level. When our friend opens up the slightest bit, if you're able to be present, that is like magic. And here's what you need to know. Just being there and being yourself. It doesn't matter if you act like another woman. She was concerned at first because she says, Tom, I'm like a little bitty librarian. And you know, there's this big tough woman. And I said, if you're yourself, people will respond, and they did, right? So I would blunder into the room. I'm not who I am. Jimmy, how you doing? Oh, yeah, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, you don't stink near as bad as you used to, right? Well, that isn't her. She can't be that. If you are yourself, you will touch that person's heart, even if for a second. There are two things people forget. Who you are has value. You know what the second thing that people forget is? Shut up. Shut up. Because you're like, did you do this? Oh yeah, but you boo, because you're nervous. In the first breath, you get truth, right? In the second breath, you get depth. In the third breath of silence, you get magic. You get love, you get So those are pretty easy things. Be yourself and shut up. That's Tom's 2-minute university for street level work.